Hi everyone, it's Nicole here for Simon Says Stamp with a trio of elegant monochromatic cards for the July 2024 edition of Making the Cut. Making the Cut is my series here on the Simon Says Stamp YouTube channel where we talk about all things die cutting. Today I am creating this trio of monochromatic cards because monochromatic cards are something that I find myself drawn to over and over again. And I thought some of the more subdued jewel tones from the Simon Says Stamp Pawsitively saturated inks, some of the newer ink trios that have been released in the last few months, would make for some beautiful cards. I often find myself drawn to maybe more bright colors, but lately I have really been drawn to some of the more jewel tones. Monochromatic cards are also one of those things that I find myself going back to over and over again in different ways because the results are always amazing. And if I'm looking for a way to create, in this case, multiple cards and be able to know that it's going to work, monochromatic cards or a monochromatic color palette, I guess monochromatic color palette, but shades in one color family, it works. It works every single time. So I am going to create my first background. You can see that I graduated the ink from Petunia to Pansy to Aster. I did start using my glass mat. I am going to switch the glass mat out. When I am filming, the glass does reflect the lights in my studio, so I'll probably use a sticky mat going forward so we avoid that glare. But I did use the glass mat because it works perfectly. And then once I am done ink blending and I have that beautiful graduation in color, I am going to take one of the new Stampers Anonymous stamp sets from Tim Holtz. This is Flower Shop, and it has this beautiful text stamp in the background, and I'm just going to repeatedly stamp this over the background with my darkest shade from the Simon Says Stamp Pawsitively Saturated ink. In this case, it's the Aster color. I'm always a fan of a text background. I'm using this stamp set for the beautiful florals anyway, so I thought, why not just go ahead and use the entire stamp set. So now that we have our tone on tone, we have our ink blended background, we have our text stamping, I am going to take this beautiful tin roof stencil. This is also a newer stencil from Simon Says Stamp. And you could really use anything here. Oh, first, I forgot, I am going to spritz my background with some Wilted Violet Distress Spritz. Each background will have a little bit of Distress Spritz for that added little shimmer and also distress. And then we're taking the Tin Roof stencil and some white grit paste, and we're just going, or opaque grit paste, and we're going to apply that over the background kind of messily. I don't want it to be full coverage. And there is our background. Now the white definitely breaks up the monochromatic of these cards. So let's go ahead and do our next two color combos and create our backgrounds. Let those dry, let the paste dry, and we'll be stamping the additional elements and sentiments for our card while that is drying. Everything dries super quickly. Now this was a surprise hit for me, this trio. I love these colors, but I had no idea how much I would love this color combo. This is clay, terracotta, and brick. And I think, believe it or not, this may be my favorite from this. It just says summer to me. This color combo was totally like those, Indian summer type of days where it's just, I don't know, maybe it's that desert feeling also to this color palette, but I just loved it. It really ended up being one of those color palettes that I couldn't believe I loved it as much as I did. I also think this color palette would be amazing for fall. I don't know about you guys, but I'm already starting to craft for fall, think about fall. I can't even believe it, but it's amazing. So after I have this ink blended, and some of those ink splotches will fade as the ink absorbs into the cardstock and dries. I did try to get it as, even as possible, but it will fade a bit. I'm going to take my darkest color in this trio, and again, that's the brick color for this one, and we're going to stamp it all over. On the darkest part of the background, the brick part, it's not going to be as dark, but on the clay and terracotta, it's going to show up, you know, even more. And I did go over a couple areas. I was like, oh, that didn't show up very good. So let's stamp it full strength. I did use first, second, and sometimes third generation stamping over my background. And it doesn't have to be perfect at all. Now, I did use the stamp wheel for this. You're going to see it does stain a little bit. I'm totally okay with that. For me, it always just means that my tools, whether it's in my MISTI, the grip mats in my MISTI, or my stamp wheel, or whatever, is well loved and used. Next, my final color combination we're using today is one of my all-time favorite color combos from the Pawsitively Saturated Ink, Dew, Mist, and Raindrop. And this is just a beautiful teal color combo, and it ends up being absolutely stunning. I am in love with all three of these color trios today. Again, very much jewel tones instead of maybe the normal rainbow brights or pastels or whatever the case may be. So I love that there's some deeper and darker shades in our Pawsitively Saturated Ink color family. Once I have these colors ink blended together, I will go ahead and do the same thing that I have done previously, where I stamp over the background with that text stamp from the Tim Holtz Flower Shop stamp set and get that text all over the background. Keep in mind, over the darkest part of each background, it's definitely not going to show up as well as it does over the lighter areas, but that's kind of the beauty of this monochromatic look. It was kind of hard to stamp on the stamp mat, so I just went to my regular mat, and I've got my wonderful Simon Says Stamp microfiber cloth to clean this up right away as I'm working. Just have a little cleaner on there. And let's take a look at all three backgrounds. Now, my purple background does have the stenciling on it already, but so beautiful. So over our teal background, we're going to use Distress Spritz in the color Peacock Feathers. And again, it's tone on tone, but it's going to add splatter and shimmer. So pretty. And then on our red background, or kind of desert background, we'll call it, I used Barn Door. Then we're going to take our tin roof stencil, and we are going to apply the grit paste through that stencil on our remaining two backgrounds. So here's what those look like. And again, I didn't do full coverage. I kind of left it somewhat messy. And here is a look at all three. So pretty. Now, while my paste is drying, I've got another piece of Nina 110-pound weight smooth white cardstock, and we're going to stamp each one of the florals from the Tim Holtz Stampers Anonymous Flower Shop stamp set with those same colors of ink. This is keeping with the monochromatic theme. So using one of my lighter shades, in this case I used the Petunia ink, I'm going to use a sponge applicator here from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm going to apply some of the darker colors, the pansy and the aster, to parts of the stamped image before stamping it on the cardstock. And that will kind of make some of the areas darker and some of the areas will remain lighter. Now, I wasn't totally thrilled with my first stamped image, so I did go ahead then and take pansy ink and stamp that all over. I just felt like the petunia was just a little too light. And then I'm going to apply the aster color to certain areas again. You could do the same stamped image for each card if you want to, or you can do like I did and use a different floral. I'm using my next floral and stamping this with my beautiful desert colors. I started with, I believe, terracotta, and then I'm just going to pounce a little bit of the brick color over some of the areas before stamping on my cardstock. And I really loved how this turned out. So beautiful. There you can kind of see those different shades in that same color family working together beautifully. Okay, once we have that, we're going to take our third and final image and we're going to stamp this with our teal colors. And then we will use the new coordinating dies from Simon Says Stamp to die cut our florals. How much do we love that Simon Says Stamp has coordinating dies for some of our favorite Tim Holtz stamp sets. So amazing. Makes them so usable for all of our cards, which I totally love. So I am just, again, doing that same thing, stamping that image, adding a little extra ink to certain areas with the darkest color, which is Raindrop, and then die cutting. For the remainder part of the card, I do want to use greetings from the Simon Says Stamp Create stamp set. It's a fantastic sentiment stamp set with dies that coordinate to all of the greetings, which is absolutely incredible. That means you have the dies. If you get the dies that go with it, you can just die cut them so easily, or you can use something like sentiment label dies or cut them into sentiment strips if you wanted to. And then instead of using the Stamp Create that comes in that stamp set, I'm going to use the standalone Create die for my cards and die cut the word Create from either silver matte or gold matte cardstock from Simon Says Stamp. And the reason being is I felt like it would just make that bold word a little bit showier and just have it stand out a little bit. We have monochromatic cards, yes, but I think we want our sentiments just to stand out a bit from the background. I did stamp the smaller phrases and I used a different phrase from the Create stamp set for each, but I coordinated the color back to the base color of the card. And then I did pull the Clustered Leaves die from Simon Says Stamp. This is an older die. I've had this one for years. It continues to be one of my favorites, but I die cut this from vellum. Vellum is one of those magical products, pardon me, that you can use on your cards that I think really helps set it apart. I didn't want to pop up my floral on my card base today because I don't want to pop up the word Create. I did try die cutting the shadow for the word because it does come with the die cut as you see here, and then the shadow for it, but I felt like the shadow covered up too much of the background. So I want to use just the die cut word as is, and it's so delicate that I didn't want to try to piece foam adhesive back behind it. So kind of thinking ahead as I am adhering everything, I didn't want to put my floral directly on my background without something to kind of set it apart. And in this case, that vellum creates that beautiful buffer between the background and our floral, and it just softens the design even more, adds to the elegant look and feel. Then I'm using liquid adhesive to glue my vellum, my floral, and my sentiments all down in place. Then we're going to put the word Create right over the top. I'm adding a little bit of glue with the glue press. And then what I like to do when I have everything that's going to be flat on the card and I want it to lay nice and flat, there's kind of quite a few layers going on here. I like to take some acrylic blocks, 1 or 2 or whatever, place them on top and let that kind of smoosh it all down and flatten it and hold it in place. Then on our sentiment strip, we're going to take my favorite little thin foam adhesive strips here from Simon Says Stamp, place a little bit on the back, and then we're going to center that smaller greeting right underneath the word Create, like so. So pretty. Now I do need to add a little bit of additional glue. I don't think I got quite enough glue on the back of my item, or behind my floral, pardon me. So I'm going to add a little bit more glue there, and then I'll just put the acrylic blocks back on it to hold it in place. Let's go ahead and assemble the remaining 2 cards quickly. When adhering the vellum back behind the flower. I do like to kind of have some parts of the vellum leaves overlapping the floral. It gives it a much more natural look. And you'll notice that I did choose the silver for the sentiments for the teal and the violet backgrounds. But for the red background, or my desert background, let's call it, I chose some gold matte cardstock. I fully had intended to die cut it from silver. In fact, I created one extra card, and so I ended up being able to use the silver die cut to create for that card. But I just didn't like how it looked. So always kind of keep that in mind as well. What colors really play well together? And I think the gold is a lot showier on that red background than the silver would have been. Then when the glue is dry, I am going to take my scissors and I'm going to flip the panels over and trim away any of the leaves hanging off of the edge of the panel. It's not going to be a ton, but just a little bit, a few little snips, maybe 3 or 4 per panel, and that cleans it up nice. And then if I find that I need to add a little extra glue under the vellum, I did do that. I didn't worry too much about hiding the glue in this case. I don't think it's going to show up very well, and I will add some embellishment here in a minute that I think will help disguise it. So here we're going to add the Create. The final thing that we are going to do for our cards today is add some embellishment. And in this case, I went to my embellishment drawer and pulled out the Sunbeam and Cool Tones Pawsitively Dazzling Gems. I love adding little gems and things to my cards. And again, I very much pulled from Cool Tones for our teal and our purple backgrounds, but for the red background, I went with the yellow, the Sunbeam color, to play off of the gold. So kind of keeping that in mind, but also sticking with our monochromatic theme. So definitely kind of pulled from the Cool Tones, aqua on aqua, purple on purple. They're not the exact color match, but close enough. And then on the red background, those Sunbeam colors just really play off of the gold perfectly. You could also choose maybe the clear ones if you wanted to match with the silver a little bit more, but I loved these gems on the purple background are actually kind of almost a light pink, but when placed on the purple, they look purple. They really blend beautifully. I love that about these Pawsitively Dazzling Gems. You really can use them on a wide array of colors. And I'm just adding little dabs of glue. I'm using the Simon Says Stamp embellishment wand to easily pick these up and pop them in place. The little triangle tray is so amazing for dumping out your embellishment and not making like a mess of it, but being able to see what you have, easily pick up exactly the size, the color that you want, and put it on your project, and then funnel it back into the storage container. Highly, highly recommend these little trays. I use them almost every single time I craft. So again, we're just snipping off the vellum leaves that are hanging off the edge of our panel and grabbing those Sunbeam gems. I don't think I had any red, and so I thought the Sunbeam would look beautiful on here, and I do really love how this ended up looking. Really plays with the gold matte cardstock perfectly. Once we have these in place, we are going to take each of our panels, place it on one of the Simon Says Stamp pre-cut and scored cardstock bases. I'm using the top fold card bases today, and our cards are all finished. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this monochromatic set of cards for the July 2024 Making the Cut. The supplies I used to create my cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Thanks so much for joining me, and we'll see you next time.
Hi there, I'm Heidi, Simon's mama and founder at simonsaysstamp.com. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you like what you just saw, be sure to press the thumbs up. and subscribe to see more great content.